Good morning, you're watching Daybreak with me, Nadia Jani, and I'll be taking you through today's headlines. So let's take a look at what they are. The third round of talks between the US and Iran are set to begin in Geneva today. 4 Cubans from US killed after speedboat opens fire on island's troops, Havana says. And India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has addressed Israel's parliament during his 2-day visit to the country. First this morning, the United States and Iran are setting out sharply opposing positions ahead of a new round of nuclear talks in Geneva. It's the third round of talks in what is seen to be the last attempt to prevent conflict in the Middle East. Here's a report.
Senior officials in Washington and Tehran have exchanged starkly different assessments of previous nuclear negotiations as the third round of talks this year between the US and Iran are set to begin in Geneva today. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said on Wednesday that Iran remains a grave threat to the United States. He cites both its nuclear ambitions and its expanding ballistic missile program. He said upcoming talks will focus largely on Iran's nuclear activities, but warned that Tehran's refusal to discuss its missile arsenal remains a major obstacle.
Iran possesses a very large number of ballistic missiles, particularly short-range ballistic missiles that threaten the United States and our bases in the region and our partners in the region. And all of our bases in the UAE, in Qatar, in Bahrain. And they also possess naval assets that threaten shipping and try to threaten the U.S. Navy. So I want everybody to understand that beyond just the nuclear program, they possess these conventional weapons that are solely designed to attack America and attack Americans if they so choose to do so.
Vice President J.D. Vance backed the administration's position, saying the United States has seen evidence that Iran is attempting to rebuild elements of its nuclear program following last year's US-led strikes.
The principle is very simple. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. If they try to rebuild a nuclear weapon, that causes problems for us. And in fact, we've seen evidence that they have tried to do exactly that. So the president sending those negotiators to try to address that problem, as the president has said repeatedly, he wants to address that problem diplomatically, but of course the president has other options as well.
Tehran, however, insists its nuclear program is for peaceful purposes only. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said progress is possible, stressing Iran will not give up its right to peaceful nuclear technology under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, but is ready to address concerns and build confidence.
There are American bases in the territory of some of them. They have made sure that they won't let their territory, their waters, their airspace would be used against Iran. To some extent, I don't know how much that can be controlled. So we are grateful for their positions. I hope that would remain the case. But if, God forbid, the US decides to attack us, then their bases in the region would be a legitimate target.
The head of the International Atomic Energy Agency added another layer of concern, warning that uncertainty over Iran's enriched uranium stockpiles creates risk.
Let's not forget that when previous military episodes occurred, when Iran responded to that fire, there were targets hit in Qatar, for example, because there are US military bases in many of those places. So the concern already goes beyond Iran's territory and becomes a sub-regional concern.
In the background is a US military buildup, with warnings a week ago from US President Donald Trump that he was giving Tehran about 10 to 15 days to make a deal.
Now let's take a look at the story shaping the day across the globe, and we head first to the CNBC website, where it says Cuba says it killed 4 exiles, wounded 6 others who attacked them from Florida speedboat. Well, we have more detail coming up in the program, but just to give you some key lines in regards to what actually happened. So there was a Florida registered boat that was sailing across its waters on Wednesday is what the Cuban government said. They opened fire on a Cuban patrol and said that they was compromised by anti-government Cubans who were on the speedboat, some of whom were previously wanted for plotting attacks as well, coming from the United States. They were dressed in camouflage, it was said, and armed with assault rifles, handguns, homemade explosive, ballistic vests, and telescopic sights. And that's all according to preliminary statements from the detainees. They also intended to carry out an infiltration for terrorist purposes as well. Now, the US has commented on this. So Marco Rubio told reporters it was not a US operation and that no US government personnel were actually involved. Now, this is a developing story, so we will bring you up to date with more information that we know, but we do know currently that there has been 4 people have been killed and 6 others wounded on this speedboat that was heading directly for Cuba, is what Cuban authorities have said. Okay, now let's move over to the next headline making waves this morning, and that's on the BBC website, and it's in relation to our top story of the day: US and Iran to hold talks as pressure for nuclear deal builds. Now, if we scroll down, I'm not particularly sure what this particular photo is showing, because it looks like a photo in either the US or the UK. But just to keep up to date on that, US and Iranian officials are due to meet in Geneva today for the 3rd set of talks. Now, we know that President Donald Trump has threatened to strike Iran if a nuclear deal is not reached. And we know that there has been a large build-up of military personnel and in the Middle East since the US-led invasion of the Iraq War. So we know it's quite big build up there. Now, Iran is vowing to respond to any attack with force if any strikes is put on their actual country. However, talks are seen as a last attempt to hopefully prevent a conflict. Trump is hoping that diplomacy does work, but has also said that he's considering a limited strike on Iran to pressure its leaders to accept this deal. Iran has rejected the US demand to stop the enrichment of its uranium program in its territory, but said that there are indications that it is prepared to offer some concessions about its nuclear program. So as I mentioned, we will keep you up to date with this. It is a developing story. They are meeting later on today, and we'll get key lines throughout the day of the course of the program in regards to what the meeting was able to accomplish as well. Right, we now go to the next website, which is the New York Times, and this story that has been bubbling over for the past couple of days since the BAFTA Awards on Sunday. So BBC and BAFTA say they are investigating after broadcast of racist slur. Now, the BAFTA Awards are a type of Oscars. You could say it's the British equivalent to the Oscars, and that aired, unfortunately, a racist slur which was uttered involuntarily by a man with Tourette's syndrome in the audience. His name was John Davidson, who was in the audience because of a movie about his life, was also nominated for an award, and he shouted out the slur when these 2 actors here, Michael B. Jordan on the left and Jordan Delroy Lindo as well. These both men were handing out an award on stage and presenting it when the remark was shouted out. Now, it was broadcasted out live with a 2-hour delay, but it was not edited out, which is what a lot of the criticism is involved around, because of the responsibility and judgment to those involved about the insensitivity in regards to this. Now, the BBC has apologised to viewers in a statement on Monday and to its staff on a day later for not editing the slur out of its broadcast, which aired on a 2-hour delay. Now, Miss Phillips, who is the head of one of the BBC departments, said that she said basically we take full responsibility for what happened, and also said the broadcast was not available on iPlayer as of Wednesday. Now, the organisers of BAFTA Awards have apologised as well in a statement on Monday, acknowledging the slur carried incomparable trauma and pain. But we will keep you updated on that. We now turn to our final headline as well, making headlines, and that's on Politico website, and that's in regards to Iceland. And Iceland looks to fast-track vote on joining the EU. So Iceland is to hold a referendum on opening its accession talks to join the European Union in the next few months. Now, there is no official date yet about when that's going to be, but they say in the next couple of months. Now, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said that he would be more than happy to see Iceland join the bloc and believes that it's a good addition to the bloc. Now, why is this happening? It comes at a time of momentum for EU enlargement appears to be growing, with Brussels working on a plan that could also give Ukraine partial membership into the bloc as early as next year. But we will keep you updated once we have a date set as to when these talks will go ahead to see whether or not Iceland can pursue its membership into the EU. Well, that's the end of your press review. Now let's take a break and I'll be back to bring you the rest of the stories shaping the day. Stay with me. Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak. Now let's take a look at the rest of the global stories. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says Kyiv expects the next round of trilateral talks in March to lead to a meeting of national leaders. The comments followed a phone call with US President Donald Trump. He said negotiations must proceed step by step to resolve complex issues and end the conflict. Meanwhile, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said Washington has increased pressure on Moscow through sanctions and continues to supply weapons to Ukraine, stressing that the United States is the only country capable of bringing both sides together.
So we don't want to walk away from we know that at the end, that war in Ukraine does not have a military solution. That war will be settled through a negotiation. And right now, we are the only country in the world that can be a catalyst for negotiation. If we forfeit that role, no one else can do it. That said, do I believe the president's patience is infinite? I do not.
In the coming hours, former US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton will appear in front of a congressional committee investigating the activities of the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Ms. Clinton told the BBC last week that she doesn't recall meeting Epstein herself. Her husband, former US President Bill Clinton, will also appear on Friday. He's denied any wrongdoing and expressed regret for his ties to Epstein. Republican Committee Chairman James Comer of Kentucky has said transcripts of their interview will be made public. Former US Treasury Secretary Larry Summers has announced he will resign from teaching at Harvard University at the end of the current academic year. It's over his connections with the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Summers went on leave as a director of a business and government school at the university in November and stopped teaching after Harvard announced a review of people named in the Epstein files. He's previously said that he's deeply ashamed of his connections with Epstein. There's no evidence of wrongdoing by Summers in the documents. He'll remain on leave from the university until he retires. Tensions between the US and Cuba have flared after a deadly incident off Cuba's north coast. Cuban officials say they killed 4 people wearing camouflage on a US-registered speedboat from Florida, which opened fire on one of their Coast Guard boats. Washington says it had no involvement and is now working to verify the details.
The sea is now calm near Cuba's coast, but on Tuesday, Cuban officials say that a US-registered speedboat from Florida fired at one of their vessels near the border. Authorities say that they killed 4 exiles and wounded 6 others during the armed confrontation off the island's northern coast. The United States says that no US government personnel were involved. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio says Washington will independently verify the incident.
We have our embassy on the ground in Havana working this as we speak, asking for access to the people that were on those vessels, if they were American citizens or permanent residents. According to the Cuban regime, that the boat was registered in Florida. We're tracking that down. We will know shortly, and we will know quickly, many more facts about this incident than we know right now.
6 suspects were detained. 2 of them were already wanted in Cuba on suspicion of plotting attacks. Authorities also arrested a man on the island accused of waiting to assist the infiltrators. Meanwhile, several Florida politicians have demanded separate inquiries, casting doubt on Cuba's version of events. The clash comes amid heightened strain between the two countries, as Washington tightens economic pressure and blocks most oil shipments to the communist-run island. Cuban exiles, many based in Miami, have historically opposed the government established by Fidel Castro, though armed plots have become increasingly rare in recent years.
Now to Spain, and the former civil guard officer Antonio Tejero, who led a failed coup in 1981, has died, aged 93, according to his law firm on Wednesday. The same day, the government moved to declassify documents linked to the plot. The files, officials say, could shed new light on the attempt to topple Spain's fledgling democracy. Tejero, a lieutenant colonel, stormed the lower house of parliament in Madrid with armed men firing shots in the air and holding lawmakers hostage for 17 hours in an attempt to force a return to dictatorship. The coup collapsed after King Juan Carlos delivered a televised address supporting the constitutional government. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has addressed Israel's parliament during his two-day visit to the country. The trip is focused on expanding defense and technology cooperation at a time of growing regional tensions.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has arrived in Jerusalem for a two-day visit aimed at deepening cooperation between India and Israel. It is his first trip to the country since 2017, when he became the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Israel. During a special session of the Israeli parliament, Modi told lawmakers that India stood with Israel with full conviction.
Our partnership is grounded in shared experience and shared aspirations. Our strong partnership not only serves national interests, but also contributes to global stability and prosperity.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu welcomed Modi and said both countries face the challenge of confronting radical Islam.
I am deeply, deeply moved by your visit here today. Because I have to be diplomatic, I will not rank it, because I'll get into trouble. But I've never been more moved than by your visit here with us, a great friend of Israel, a great champion of the Indian-Israeli alliance.
The two leaders are expected to hold talks on artificial intelligence and defense cooperation. Israel is seeking to expand military exports, while India has increased security collaboration in recent years. Modi is visiting while the United States has deployed a carrier strike group near Iran amid stalled nuclear talks. Additional US naval forces are moving toward the Mediterranean near Israel, according to the Pentagon. Analysts warn that a US strike on Iran could trigger Iranian retaliation against Israel and Gulf states. Millions of Indians live in these regions and send home remittances, raising the stakes for Modi's visit.
Later in the programme, I'll be joined by an expert to go over the meeting with Narendra Modi and Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and what the key outtakes were. Now, this isn't something you expect on your daily commute, but two cars in Nebraska in the US were swallowed by a sinkhole while at a traffic light stop. Traffic cam footage shows these two cars waiting, as you can see there, and as you would at a red light, and then this happened. The ground gives way and the cars fall into a sinkhole. The vehicles behind swiftly reverse back as the passengers try to get out. According to local reports, there were no injuries and both drivers were able to climb out of the cars. Police have now closed the road in both directions following this incident. Shocking. The death toll in Brazil after heavy floods and landslides has now climbed to 46 people in Minas Gerais who have been killed. Rescue teams are battling through thick mud and dozens remain missing as communities struggle to recover. Here's that report.
The death toll from Monday's landslides in southeastern Brazil has risen to 46, while 21 people remain missing, according to authorities. The disaster struck the state of Minas Gerais, causing severe flooding and sending thick mud and debris across towns and villages. Brazil's federal government has accelerated relief operations, sending health workers and national defense personnel to assist those affected. As the rain eased on Tuesday evening, volunteers and officials worked to support residents who lost homes and loved ones in the flooding.
A video appeared on G1 local media of a woman being rescued. It was my aunt. We recognised her. I called Santa Casa Hospital and the HPS Hospital, and she was found at the HPS Hospital. She's there, she's recovering.
I prayed a lot to God and asked God a lot for Dodio, Joyce, her neighbours, and everyone who was there to get out alive. I prayed a lot to God.
Brazil's federal government has declared a state of calamity in Juiz de Fora, where officials say around 3,600 residents have been displaced in the cities of Juiz de Fora and Uba. Flooding and landslips have also forced municipal schools to suspend classes. The country is in the height of its summer rainy season, from December to March, when intense storms often trigger landslides.
Now we're going to take a quick break. When I return, I'll be joined by an in-studio guest to go over some of the regional headlines. Stay with us. Welcome back and thank you for joining me this morning. Now, we turn to regional news, and another shipment of petroleum products has been sent from Azerbaijan to Armenia yesterday on Wednesday. A total of 39 tank wagons carrying 4,500 tons of diesel fuel were dispatched from the Guzdek station of Azerbaijan Railways towards the Buyak-Kesik station on the Azerbaijan-Georgia border. The previous shipment was sent on the 11th of January when 18 rail wagons loaded with 979 tons of RON 92 petrol were dispatched. Staying on this topic, and the scale of the shipment is quite notable. It follows earlier deliveries on the 9th and 11th of January. What initially appeared as a symbolic breakthrough has now evolved into a recurring logistical operation. The trains are moving, but the question is whether policy will move with them. Joining me now to grapple with this question is political analyst Fuad Karimli. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so we just had that report earlier in regards to the deliveries made between Azerbaijan and Armenia, and obviously the partnership and the truce is helping to bring more of those deliveries in. Now, my question is, does the growing scale of the fuel deliveries indicate deepening trust between the two or simply achieving economic goals?
Well, I think, first of all, yes, there are economic goals in between both countries. So Azerbaijan is selling more fuel, so we're getting more revenue. Armenia is getting fuel at a lower cost. We see Georgia also in the process by decreasing the transit fees. But I think the main idea here is that by increasing the fuel shipments, we're also building consistency. So there's increasing energy trade. So there's reliability on both ends that could actually move. And I think that's the main idea behind it, to build trust between the two countries.
Right, so this is actually helping to build trust between them. Like, this is like the step to making sure that that trust solidifies, would you say?
Yes, and also adding that consistency, it also adds an element of dependency between the two countries. So Armenia has been facing a lot of increased inflation in fuel prices. So what better way to mend ties and look to the future than helping each other, in that context.
Yes, it's definitely a change that these two countries are coming together to work together in regards to building up both of their economic goals and priorities. Now, how strategically significant then is diesel as a backbone fuel for industry and transport compared to earlier gasoline shipments?
That's really interesting, actually, when we look at the difference between gasoline and diesel. So gasoline is usually for consumers, individuals, cars, but diesel is really the backbone of industry, agriculture, heavy industry. So it shows that Azerbaijan is ready and willing to help in Armenia in diversifying its fuel sources for its industry. So it's a step forward. It's not just for the public, but it's for the industry itself. So it carries a really big strategic significance in that sense.
Yes, and I guess with that, as you mentioned, diesel being more of that lucrative kind of format of energy, the implications for that for both countries in the next, I don't know, 4 to 5 years, where would that go? Could we see more increase between deliveries?
In terms of fuel, I think this is, well, all of this is well thought out and well planned between the two countries to increase the normalization process. So I think everyone is aware of that. But I think it all has to go step by step. So public view of the situation is really important. How they approach the situation is really important. So yes, the energy trade is increasing. It has benefits for both Armenia and Azerbaijan. But the main effect here is for the public to understand that they're both benefiting from this. So in that light, I think, yes, in the next coming days, months, and years, that this will intensify, and hopefully it will intensify, because that entails that there will be some sort of strategic interconnectedness between the countries. That usually it does happen between neighboring countries, but we've lacked because of the conflict.
Yes, and the war, and now coming together, binding that with transit, with fuel deliveries is helping to kind of, as you mentioned, build trust and also grow the economy. My next question is, does reliance then on transit through Georgia represent a temporary workaround or a durable model for regional integration?
I think taking into consideration the current sensitivities and the realities, Georgia has always been one of the facilitators in the region. So they've always been helpful to both Azerbaijan and Armenia in the normalization process, or attempting at least in the past. But right now, for the scale of shipments and the deliveries, I think for direct shipments, there has to be large investment into infrastructure. So to railways, to roads that need to be reconstructed. So I think Georgia already has that infrastructure. It acts as a base. It shows how this transport, basically it shows the outcome. So something's leaving from Baku, from Azerbaijan, and it's going to Yerevan. And the effect is what's important right now. Once the public sees the effect, the government see the effect, I think that will be more of a way to entice the governments to actually build connectivity.
So would you say then that it's a pilot scheme to see whether or not, okay, if this works, we can build on that, would you say?
Definitely. I think, yeah, they're trying to show the benefits of this trade, and it would act as a precursor to, for example, TRIP. So direct contact between Azerbaijan and Armenia through trade and logistics.
Yes, which I will get to later on, because TRIP is a very big deal, especially for the region. Now, at what point does recurring trade become economically and politically costly to reverse?
I think once we're looking at the trade that's been going on, so the volume of trade has been steadily increasing. So once it reaches a threshold where, for example, from this light, from yesterday's trade, we can see once we see that the Armenian public has that effect of, our oil prices are going down, we see it on industry, we see it on the products that we buy, that's affected by heavy industry. It really doesn't leave much room for reignition of conflict. So in the public domain, I think this is the biggest idea of showing people that, look, we're building on peace, we're learning how to live in peace, and this is the effect of it. So the elements within the society that would want the conflict to reignite, they don't really have that much arguments for it, other than the fact that it would cause more destruction, loss of lives, and then they would have a counter argument saying, look, we're already benefiting from the peace, economically, livelihood, all of this.
Yeah, it's having much more of a higher benefit to both, to both countries and to the region overall. So it's proving that it's much more better than it is than taking it away. Okay, then, so if fuel trade proves sustainable, what sector might logically follow as the next kind of test of economic cooperation?
I think when we look at the dynamics in the region, right? So Azerbaijan is an oil exporting, natural gas exporting country. So when we look at Armenia, we have to look at their economic sector. What do they have to offer? But not just Armenia. So it has to be from both sides. So I think agriculture is one of the main things. I think that would be one of the steps forward. So not right now. I think maybe moving into electricity would be logical. But then agriculture also has that I think, that added benefit of symbolism, right? So if you have food on your table from someone you've reconciled with, made peace with, and it really carries that symbolic effect. Like when you put fuel in your car, you don't really know which fuel it is. But when you have a product, a finished product from one country to the other, it really solidifies, it acts as a symbol of that peace. So I think agriculture is one of the ways that could develop, and electricity as well.
Okay, that's really interesting, and I guess with agriculture from both sides, it can further build sustainable growth and trust between the two. So are these shipments reshaping the regional order then, or merely operating within its existing constraints?
Well, if we say that it's operating within its existing constraints, we have to say that what's been happening in the past is also continuing, but it's not. So we see that bilateral trade is happening, and this is something that hasn't happened for the past few decades. So yes, there is changes within the system, especially in the region system. I wouldn't say that it's completely shifted. So our neighbors are still our neighbors, they're still there. We saw that in one of these shipments that Russian products actually went to Armenia through Azerbaijan. So it shows that, for example, neighbors like Russia, they still want to be involved in the region. They don't want to be left out. They are trying to fit into the new normal. So look into that dynamic and see where they can act in it. But it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a whole systemic shift. But I think also there is an element of both countries coming together in unity and saying that we want to determine our own fate, right? We want to say what our future will be like. So that's a big shift in that sense.
Yes, and just to press on that now, seeing as you mentioned the new normal, are there any hindrances or obstacles to that? You mentioned actors like Russia still trying to be a part of it in some way, shape or form. We know that their influence was very heavy over the past, 10, 15 years, and now that's really lacking, that we've seen with the Trump route to prosperity and the US involvement. But are there any obstacles to this kind of new normal?
I think right now, at least, other than some local elements that might not want to reconcile due to historic grievances within both countries, I think the biggest obstacle right now are the regional neighbors, right? So like I mentioned, Russia, but then the biggest obstacle in terms of trip is Iran. So how open is Iran to having its border basically delimited by this route? Historically, that's where Iran has always had shipments to Armenia. But I think that's kind of out of our scope. So because Iran has its own issues with the US, I think it already has a lot on its plate. But regardless of the fact, I think Iran also understands that there's a new normal going on, that internationally, no one can really go out and say that I'm against peace. So no one morally should say that there shouldn't be peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So even though they might have that kind of rhetoric within themselves, basically, they have to act according to international law. And if there's a peace agreement that's on the way, they have to, adapt to it. No, definitely, and it's very interesting because we did speak to, one of my colleagues spoke to the Iran minister in relation to that and what they thought about the Zangezur corridor, and they were very diplomatic in their responses due to that. But just focusing now on the trip route and the US's involvement in all of this, how much of that has actually played a big part in bringing not only the two sides together, but kind of forwarding what this new normal looks like and growth within trade, within trust relations between these two countries? I think the US being involved as an actor had a really significant role. So I think even the confidence building measures starting with trade, with economic benefits, it kind of has that air of US pragmatism, rationalism that, look, why make war when we can make money? So it's kind of like Trump's motto, I think, in that sense of looking at solving conflicts, that we can have a rational outlook. Obviously, that's not the case all the time. We see that people don't really act rationally, and they can get involved in their emotions and, in grievances at least. But I think the US played a really important role, and it still continues to play a really important role. Vice President J.D. Vance visited the region. It was a really significant visit, especially to both countries. It was cooperative. There was charters signed between both of them with the US. So I think if the US continues on this route, that really they can be a part of this peace deal. But I also hope that even if they don't, Azerbaijan and Armenia sees that peace is the only way forward.
Yes, well, thank you so much for going through that with us and for enlightening our audience. So Fouad Karimli, political analyst, thank you very much. Great. We now move over to some news in relation to Tehran. And Iran has signalled it's ready to forge defence ties with Armenia. Major General Abdulrahim Mousavi emphasised the importance of increased cooperation between the two countries. A meeting with Armenia Defence Minister in Tehran also brought that to the forefront. Now, our correspondent Tarash Shiralilu has more from Tehran.
Armenian Defense Minister Soren Papikian visited Tehran and met with President Masoud Pezeshkian, Chairman of Chief of Staff of Iran's Armed Forces, Major General Abdulrahim Mousavi, and Defense Minister Brigadier General Aziz Nasirzadeh. According to official sources, expansion of bilateral defense ties as well as developments in the South Caucasus were discussed during the visit on Tuesday. President Pezeshkian told the visiting minister that Iran is determined to finalize the comprehensive strategic partnership agreement with Armenia. He stated that Tehran is serious in strengthening economic and corridor cooperation with Yerevan, considering the friendly relations between their governments. Also in the meeting with Iran's top military official, General Mousavi expressed Tehran's satisfaction with the peace process between the Republic of Armenia and the Republic of Azerbaijan. Chairman of Chief of Staff of Iran's Armed Forces expressed Tehran's readiness to develop defense cooperation with Yerevan. And in the meeting with his Armenian counterpart, Iran's defense minister welcomed expansion of ties with Armenia in the context of mutual understanding and strategic partnership. General Nasirzadeh stressed that regional security must be ensured through interaction and cooperation of regional states, rejecting presence of foreign countries in the region. The visit came on the eve of Iran-US indirect nuclear talks scheduled for Thursday in Geneva and amid escalation of tensions and speculation of war between Tehran and Washington following US military buildup in the region. Turash Shiralilu, Tehran, Foreign News.
Foreign business activity in Kazakhstan is on the rise, with notable shifts in the geography of investment and corporate presence. New official data points to a sharp increase in companies with Chinese ownership. Here's our correspondent with some more information.
Kazakhstan is seeing a clear increase in foreign business activity, with China emerging as the main driver of this growth. According to the National Bureau of Statistics, in 2025, the number of registered legal entities and branches with foreign ownership rose by 8%, reaching 64,000. The fastest growth came from companies with Chinese ownership. The number increased by 56% to 8,400. A similar trend was recorded for businesses from Uzbekistan, up 43% to 8,500 companies. At the same time, the presence of several traditional partners declined, with a reduced number of companies linked to Russia, Turkey and Kyrgyzstan. This trend fits into a broader regional picture. China remains a strategic investor across Central Asia, and by mid-2025, the total volume of accumulated Chinese investment in the region reached nearly $36 billion. 1.5 times higher than in 2020. A significant share of this growth has been concentrated in Kazakhstan, which has become the largest recipient of Chinese capital, accounting for about 1/3 of the regional total. Analysts note that the investment is gradually shifting away from the raw materials sector toward manufacturing and energy. This points to a change in the nature of China's presence in the region, from primarily resource-based to more structured and long-term. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, A News.
Uzbekistan has begun geological exploration at 3 oil and gas blocks in Afghanistan, while the two countries move to strengthen broader economic cooperation. Here's more.
Uzbekistan has launched geological exploration works at the Muhammad Jandagar, Shamar and Ahmedabad blocks in northern Afghanistan. The project is being implemented by Uzbek Overseas Geology Company, which received a license from Afghan authorities to search for hydrocarbons as well as iron and copper deposits. The move builds on earlier cooperation in Afghanistan's energy sector. In October 2024, an Uzbek company signed a 10-year contract to explore and develop the Toti Maidan gas field, with planned investments of $100 million in the first year and up to $1 billion over a decade. The field covers around 7,500 square kilometers and includes about 30 wells, with extraction expected to begin soon. At the same time, Tashkent and Kabul have agreed to accelerate the entry into force of their preferential trade agreement. Bilateral trade has grown 2.5 times in 5 years, from $653 million in 2021 to $1.7 billion in 2025. And the two sides have set a target of increasing turnover to $5 billion. The expansion of geological projects and trade mechanisms reflect a broader strategy to deepen economic engagement between the two countries. It is Sivil Rajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
Now, you may have noticed that there's very little music on our daybreak intervals, and that's because today many across the nation in Azerbaijan will be marking the 34th anniversary of the Khojaly massacre. We have this special report highlighting the horrors of genocide around the world and the consequence of global silence. To prevent history from repeating itself, it must be known that we must not look away. Here's the report.
This February is a time of deep sorrow for us, for all the people of Khojaly. Then they entered the town. We fled under a bridge, through the space between two rivers. That winter was especially harsh. It was a terrible situation.
A city erased in one night. Khojaly, once one of the largest towns in Karabakh, saw its existence come to a brutal end on the night of 25 February 1992. Armenian armed forces, supported by the 366 Motorized Rifle Regiment, surrounded the town. As residents fled into the forests and fields seeking safety, the freezing winter and relentless gunfire turned their escape into a massacre. In the aftermath of the attack, 613 Azerbaijanis lost their lives, including 106 women, 63 children, and 70 elderly people. Thousands suffered severe injuries, hundreds were taken hostage, and many remain missing to this day. The events in Khojaly are not just a dark chapter in Azerbaijan's history. Under international law, such acts constitute war crimes and crimes against humanity.
I lost 10 family members. I still don't know the fate of 4 of them: my father-in-law, my brother-in-law, my son, my husband. Today, I am grateful to be back in my own home, in my own yard.
According to the 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide, genocide is defined as acts committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial or religious group. The Khojaly massacre meets these criteria. Yet, decades later, the world has still not fully recognized this atrocity.
What happened in Khojaly is a series of crimes, heinous crimes, both under international law and under national law. And what makes them specific is that they were committed within the context of armed conflict. So they qualify both as war crimes and crimes against humanity. So above all, the massacre in Khojaly, there is a reason to say that there was a genocide.
This was not the first such crime, nor would it be the last. The Holocaust, events in Srebrenica, Rwanda, and the genocide in Khojaly are some of the tragic pages in the history of humanity. But life goes on, wounds heal, and cities rebuild. Today, residents return to Khojaly, instilling hope that after destruction comes rebuilding, and with rebuilding, healing.
It's now time for a break. When I come back, I'll have a full update on the latest headlines, plus a look at what's making the front pages this morning. Stay with us. Good morning, you're watching Daybreak and I'm your host Nadia Jani. If you're just joining me, I'm going to be taking you through the day's top stories. So let's take a look at today's headlines. The third round of talks between the US and Iran are set to begin in Geneva today. 4 Cubans from US killed after speedboat opens fire on island's troops, Havana says. And India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has addressed Israel's parliament during his 2-day visit to the country. Now let's take a look at the story shaping the day across the globe, and we head first to the CNBC website in regards to what's taking place over in Cuba. The headline reads, Cuba says it killed 4 exiles, wounded 6 others who attacked from Florida speedboat. We have more of this story in the report, but just to give you some of the key headlines, Cuban authorities said that this took place over its waters on Wednesday, and those on the boat opened fire on a Cuban patrol. They said the group was comprised of anti-government Cubans, some of whom were previously wanted for plotting attacks coming from the United States, dressed in camouflage and armed with assault rifles, handguns, homemade explosives and ballistic vests, as well as the telescopic sights. So that's according to preliminary statements from the detainees. They were able to arrest 6 detainees and able to get this statement from them. Apparently they also intended to carry out on infiltration for terrorist purposes. Now, the US have been contacted in regards to this, and the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio told reporters it was not a US operation and that no US government personnel were involved in what took place on this speedboat. But more information about this will be coming out in the coming day, in a few hours most probably, and will provide you with more information. Now we go to our next headline that is making its way across the morning, and that's to BBC and Pope Leo to visit 4 African countries in April. So it's Pope Leo's 14th will begin a 10-day visit to 4 countries from the 13th, marking his first pastoral trip to the continent. Now, the Vatican announced that on Wednesday. He will now travel to, these are the countries, Algeria, Cameroon, Angola and Equatorial Guinea, and it's the first time that a pope will also visit Algeria, whose population is mostly Muslim. Now, in December, he had expressed the desire to visit the continent, citing Algeria, the birthplace of St. Augustine of Hippo, as a potential destination, and now that is going to be realized. So we'll make sure we provide you with all the information as we find it, but that information is here. We know that within the continent of Africa, it's home to about 20% of the world's Catholics, so quite a large number. And the last Pope trip to visit the African continent was in February 2023 by the late Pope Francis. So it's now on the agenda for this year. So we'll provide you with more information as we get it in regards to this. We now turn to the next headline that will be all over the papers this morning, and that's in regards to the US says Iran's refusal to discuss its ballistic missile program is a big problem, and that's on a news website. We know that this is the third set of indirect talks between the US and Iran, and they're due to meet in Geneva today. We also know that President Donald Trump has been very vocal in what he wants and has also threatened to strike Iran if a nuclear deal is not reached. We know that there's been a large military buildup in the Middle East, the largest since the invasion of Iraq in 2003, but Iran is vowing to respond to any attack on its shores, on its soil. So hopefully they're saying that they want to provide a amicable solution in regards to what both sides want. But for more information, we have now a dedicated report about this. Let's turn to it.
Senior officials in Washington and Tehran have exchanged starkly different assessments of previous nuclear negotiations as the third round of talks this year between the US and Iran are set to begin in Geneva today. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said on Wednesday that Iran remains a grave threat to the United States. He cites both its nuclear ambitions and its expanding ballistic missile program. He said upcoming talks will focus largely on Iran's nuclear activities, but warned that Tehran's refusal to discuss its missile arsenal remains a major obstacle.
Iran possesses a very large number of ballistic missiles, particularly short-range ballistic missiles that threaten the United States and our bases in the region and our partners in the region. And all of our bases in the UAE, in Qatar, in Bahrain. And they also possess naval assets that threaten shipping and try to threaten the U.S. Navy. So I want everybody to understand that beyond just a nuclear program, they possess these conventional weapons that are solely designed to attack America and attack Americans if they so choose to do so.
Vice President J.D. Vance backed the administration's position, saying the United States has seen evidence that Iran is attempting to rebuild elements of its nuclear program following last year's US-led strikes.
The principle is very simple. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. If they try to rebuild a nuclear weapon, that causes problems for us. And in fact, we've seen evidence that they have tried to do exactly that. So the president sending those negotiators to try to address that problem, as the president has said repeatedly, he wants to address that problem diplomatically, but of course the president has other options as well.
Tehran, however, insists its nuclear program is for peaceful purposes only. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said progress is possible, stressing Iran will not give up its right to peaceful nuclear technology under the Non-Proliferation Treaty, but is ready to address concerns and build confidence.
There are American bases in the territory of some of them. They have made sure that they won't let their territory, their waters, their airspace would be used against Iran. To some extent, I don't know how much that can be controlled. So we are grateful for their positions. I hope that would remain the case. But if, God forbid, the US decides to attack us, then their bases in the region would be a legitimate target.
The head of the International Atomic Energy Agency added another layer of concern, warning that uncertainty over Iran's enriched uranium stockpiles creates risk.
Let's not forget that when previous military episodes occurred, when Iran responded to that fire, there were targets hit in Qatar, for example, because there are US military bases in many of those places. So the concern already goes beyond Iran's territory and becomes a sub-regional concern.
In the background is a US military buildup with warnings a week ago from US President Donald Trump that he was giving Tehran about 10 to 15 days to make a deal.
In the coming hours, former US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton will appear in front of a congressional committee investigating the activities of the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Ms. Clinton told the BBC last week that she doesn't recall meeting Epstein herself. Her husband, former US President Bill Clinton, will also appear on Friday. He's denied any wrongdoing and expressed regret for his ties to Epstein. Republican Committee Chairman James Comer of Kentucky has said transcripts of their interviews will be made public. Following on from the backlash from the Epstein files, former US Treasury Secretary Larry Summers has announced he will resign from teaching at Harvard University at the end of the current academic year. Summers went on leave as a director of a business and government school at the university in November and stopped teaching after Harvard announced a review of people named in the Epstein files. He's previously said that he's deeply ashamed of his connections with Epstein. However, there's no evidence of wrongdoing by Summers in those documents. He'll remain on leave from the university until he retires. In Spain, former civil guard officer Antonio Tejero, who led a failed coup in 1981, has died at the age of 93, according to his law firm on Wednesday, the same day the government moved to declassify documents linked to the plot. The files could shed new light on the attempt to topple Spain's fledgling democracy, officials say. Tejero, a lieutenant colonel, stormed the lower house of parliament in Madrid with armed men firing shots in the air and holding lawmakers hostage for 17 hours in an attempt to force a return to dictatorship. The coup collapsed after King Juan Carlos delivered a televised address supporting the constitutional government. Tensions between the US and Cuba have flared after a deadly incident off Cuba's north coast. Cuban officials say they killed 4 people wearing camouflage on a US-registered speedboat from Florida, which opened fire on one of their Coast Guard boats. Washington says it had no involvement and is now working to verify the details.
The sea is now calm near Cuba's coast, but on Tuesday, Cuban officials say that a US-registered speedboat from Florida fired at one of their vessels near the border. Authorities say that they killed 4 exiles and wounded 6 others during the armed confrontation off the island's northern coast. The United States says that no US government personnel were involved. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio says Washington will independently verify the incident.
We have our embassy on the ground in Havana working this as we speak, asking for access to the people that were on those vessels, if they were American citizens or permanent residents, according to the Cuban regime, that the boat was registered in Florida. We're tracking that down. We will know shortly, and we will know quickly, many more facts about this incident than we know right now.
6 suspects were detained. 2 of them were already wanted in Cuba on suspicion of plotting attacks. Authorities also arrested a man on the island accused of waiting to assist the infiltrators. Meanwhile, several Florida politicians have demanded separate inquiries, casting doubt on Cuba's version of events. The clash comes amid heightened strain between the 2 countries, as Washington tightens economic pressure and blocks most oil shipments to the communist-run island. Cuban exiles, many based in Miami, have historically opposed the government established by Fidel Castro, though armed plots have become increasingly rare in recent years.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has addressed Israel's parliament during his 2-day visit to the country. The trip is focused on expanding defense and technology cooperation at a time of growing regional tensions. Here's the report.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has arrived in Jerusalem for a 2-day visit aimed at deepening cooperation between India and Israel. It is his first trip to the country since 2017, when he became the first Indian Prime Minister to visit Israel. During a special session of the Israeli parliament, Modi told lawmakers that India stood with Israel with full conviction.
Our partnership is grounded in shared experience and shared aspirations. Our strong partnership not only serves national interests, but also contributes to global stability and prosperity.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu welcomed Modi and said both countries face the challenge of confronting radical Islam.
I am deeply, deeply moved by your visit here today. Because I have to be diplomatic, I will not rank it, because I'll get into trouble. But I've never been more moved than by your visit here with us, a great friend of Israel, a great champion of the Indian-Israeli alliance.
The two leaders are expected to hold talks on artificial intelligence and defence cooperation. Israel is seeking to expand military exports, while India has increased security collaboration in recent years. Modi is visiting while the United States has deployed a carrier strike group near Iran amid stalled nuclear talks. Additional US naval forces are moving toward the Mediterranean near Israel, according to the Pentagon. Analysts warn that a US strike on Iran could trigger Iranian retaliation against Israel and Gulf states. Millions of Indians live in these regions and send home remittances, raising the stakes for Modi's visit.
Staying on this topic, I'm now joined by geopolitical and geoeconomics analyst Umesh Kumar Agrawal to discuss this trip between India and Israel. Narendra Modi going over to Israel and also presenting to their government in the Knesset yesterday. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much.
My first question to you is India's relationship with Israel has grown significantly since Modi came into power decades ago. Why is Israel's relation so important to India?
If you see, Israel has been a trusted defense partner of India. Even in 1999, during the Kargil war, Israel supplied us with the ammunitions, and India was short of ammunitions at that point of time. And after Narendra Modi ji government came to power in 2017, India's Narendra Modi ji became the first leader to visit Israel. And a decade later, 9 years later, you can see again Narendra Modi ji has visited Israel and he has delivered a speech in the Israeli parliament Knesset, where he got overwhelming welcome from all the quarters of the Israeli people. Not only Benjamin Netanyahu, but even the opposition leader Lapid also welcomed Modi ji. And here Modi ji was also honored with the prestigious medal of the Knesset. So what I believe is India and Israel are actually natural partners and they are victim of the radical jihadi terrorism both the countries are experiencing collectively. If you see in the Middle East, there is a axis evolving between Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan. And Turkey has emerged as one of the most direct threat to Israel after Iran. And a few days back, I remember Naftali Bennett also stated the same. And Turkey has a defense industry. Turkey has is a NATO member as well. It has the NATO weaponry also. So right now, Turkey, in anticipation of Turkish threat, India is joining alliances with Israel and deepening its military cooperation. And also, Israel is planning to Israel is planning to launch its defense factories in India because they want to have
Yeah, no, that's great. Sorry to cut you off, Mr. Agarwal. It just shows, obviously, Israel and India's strong ties and connections in regards to defence cooperation and a number of other matters. Now, what I want to ask is how will India then balance its ties with Israel and other Middle East countries like Iran?
See, India has a civilizational connect with Iran, and we have done massive investments in Iran as well. But lately, if you see, Iran has also gone into the axis of China, and it is right now the Americans and the Israelis are planning to have a strike on Iran anytime. It can happen by late tomorrow as well. This is my assessment. And it is really in this wartime, it is very difficult. You can see that our leader has gone to the Middle East and he may try to diffuse the tension as well. But what we are seeing right now is India is also has condemned Israel in the United Nations also. but our security requirements mean that we need to have a greater defense partnership with Israel, because in the recently concluded war with Pakistan in Operation Sindoor, we had five used Israeli ammunitions like the Rampage. And right now, Israel is also willing to share the iron beam and Iron Dome defense system, missile defense system with India. And this shows that there is a deepening partnership between both countries. And also, if you see, Israel is looking to import the human talent from India as well. The free trade agreement between India and Israel has started, and Israel is looking for massive investments in India in the field of AI, drip irrigation, defense. And this is a natural partnership in which both the countries are affected with the jihadi radicalized terrorism practiced by this Sunni alliance. So,
Yes.
and one more thing, India and UAE are also signing a strategic defense partnership pact, and India also has a good relationship with Saudi Arabia as well. Mohammed bin Salman has assured India that any defense partnership with Pakistan will not alter the Indo-Saudi ties as well. So a very balancing act where which the Prime Minister of India enjoys good rapport with all the warring factions, and if time comes, he can act as a peacemaker as well.
Right, there's a lot to chew on what you just said. In regards to relations with Iran and what's going on there, we do know that they're having talks with the US, third set around of talks in Geneva in regards to that. Hopefully, we don't know whether or not a strike will happen. They're trying to look down the diplomacy route. But just to highlight that, as you know, we don't know whether or not a strike will happen. But in regards to India's position in relation to Israel and a number of Middle Eastern countries, you highlighted quite a few there, as well as their partnership with Saudi Arabia. But now I want to just look at, we know that India is currently Israel's second largest trading partner in Asia, and that's after China, and strengthening its ties is high on the list. But in that regard, why is India important to Israel then?
See, if you see Israeli population, the Jewish population has come to India 2000 years back. And yesterday, while addressing Knesset, the Indian Prime Minister stated that the Israeli population has been never persecuted in India. And if you see, India and Israel enjoy a very good alliance, and Israel has the technology, India has the market. Remember, 67% of our population is below the age of 35. We have the demographic dividend with us. We have the market with us. We have the tech with us. We have the manpower market. Everything what we have, the scale India has. So Israel is looking to deepen its partnership and reap the fruits of development in sharing an alliance with India. This is the natural partnership both are looking at. And India also gets high tech Israeli weaponry, and it has to defend its own borders against the hostile nuclear neighbors. Remember, India is the only country surrounded by two hostile nuclear neighbors. One is Pakistan and one is China. So India has to take care of its security. Unless and until we develop that deterrence, the world will not take us. The world will not take us seriously. And the same thing happened with Ukraine. If you remember, in 1994, they gave up their nuclear weapons, and after that, Russia invaded Ukraine. So this is the thing of deterrence which is being played, and I believe that Israeli investments in India will certainly deter Pakistan and China to do a collective misadventure in India in future.
Right, well, both of their relationships show something very big on the global scale in relation to diplomacy between these two countries. And as you mentioned, that Narendra Modi was the first leader to visit Israel back at that particular time. Now, where could their relationship continue to grow and flourish? And are there any challenges that they have to also manage within that?
The basic challenges will come on the Palestinian issue. India has constantly condemned Israel actions in the Gaza Strip, and India is against all this rehabilitation efforts which are being done in the Gaza Strip and what Israel is doing. India stands with Palestinian as well. So what I mean is, right now India has to do a fine balancing act. They need to ensure that the board of board of peace plan to rehabilitate Gaza has to go in order according to the agreement which is being reached out. And also India needs the Israeli investments as well. But one thing I can say that the camaraderie between Modi and Benjamin Netanyahu is being seen, and Benjamin Netanyahu has personally gone to the airport to receive Narendra Modi ji, and he has given him the red carpet welcome. He has not given this to any other leader in the world. This shows the depth of the relationship between Modi ji and Benjamin Netanyahu. And Israel is also a very critical defense supplier to India. And in future, considering the defense threats from both Pakistan and China, we do need the Iron Dome and the Iron Beam technology, which we can get from Israel. And Israel has also stated that they are willing to give us the Golden Hammer missiles as well. So these can strike deep inside our enemy territories and even eliminate terrorists who are hiding in the bunkers.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Agarwal, for explaining that and the deep ties between both countries. I'm sure we will be looking more into this in the coming year. Thank you again.
Thank you very much.
You're watching Daybreak on A News. We're going to take a quick break and return with some more stories. Stay with me. Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak with me, Nadia Jani. Now, we head over to Europe, and US President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky have spoken by telephone ahead of talks between officials from both countries in Geneva. Our correspondent Anita Sharma has the details.
Welcome to this day in Europe as Ukrainian negotiators prepare to meet US officials in Geneva. Ahead of the bilateral meeting, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he was on a call with US President Trump, his son-in-law Jared Kushner, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and that they discussed the issues being addressed today. The immediate focus is not on an iconic peace deal, but on laying groundwork, drafting economic documents on reconstruction, and discussing prisoner exchanges ahead of the next round of U.S.-mediated talks expected in early March. Kyiv is pitching an ambitious prosperity package to attract up to $800 billion in public and private investment to rebuild Ukraine's shattered economy. Now, that's a figure far above the most recent World Bank cost estimate of roughly $588 billion. But the deeper significance of this meeting lies in the political impasse that has dogged peace efforts. Zelensky made very clear the greatest obstacles are not military, but political will and territorial questions. In particular, Russia's demand that Ukraine cede control of territory it still holds in the east, which Kyiv has repeatedly rejected. He also emphasized that Ukraine is not trying to obtain nuclear weapons and that this is all just an attempt to exert political pressure on Kyiv. So, what can come out of this meeting today? Key analysts and diplomats caution that major breakthroughs remain unlikely. Previous U.S. brokered talks, including recent sessions in Geneva and Abu Dhabi, failed to bridge the gap on fundamental issues like territorial control and security guarantees. While Kyiv wants to strengthen its hand and secure Western support for reconstruction, D.C. is positioning itself as a mediator as Russia refuses to shift its core demands. Meantime, real impact, a ceasefire, territorial compromise, or binding peace deal still looks distant. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Thank you for joining me. That's the end of the news hour. I'll be back tomorrow morning to take you through more of the headlines. Make sure you stay tuned to A News for further updates. Thank you.